I'm your host, Christene Marie. Tonight we are talking about a few updates to the show, and frankly, we're going to keep it brief tonight. I am really excited about a few things that we have in the works. Today, I actually spent the day at my sister's house, and we just dove into 2026 planning, and I used a template that a friend of mine created. She calls it 1 year later, and she's an expert in the AI, expert entrepreneur, just absolutely brilliant human. And so I was so excited to use her template, and then also created a couple of prompts for myself. And it was so beneficial to take time today and just really dive in. Like we started at, I think I got to their house at 9, and then we had breakfast and just caught up until 10, and then we dove in, and it was really really effective. So if you don't have a planning session on your calendar for 2026, I would highly recommend it. And it doesn't have to be formal. It was just the three of us, my two sisters and I, and we literally paused, went to the gym, came back. I did my hair, and I had my hair in curlers and worked on 2026 planning. So it doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be anything ornate or going anywhere, spending a whole bunch of money. It's literally about time. And actually, time is money. So in some ways, this is actually a very expensive day because you're choosing not to spend your time on other things. So when we look at it that way, when we actually look at how we're spending our time and really doing an analysis of, all right, where I spend my time reflects what I honor, who I honor, and also how I spend my time reflects and reveals to me how I think about me. How much time are we actually setting aside for ourselves? And part of planning 2026 is that very thing. Are we going to honor and how we enter this year? Are we going to honor 2025 and all that it held for us? It was such a fun thing. I actually sat down and went through. I just started at January 26th and kind of went through this past year. Hi, Aubrey. I just saw you joined on YouTube. I'm so glad to see you're back. I started looking back at my pictures from 2025 and just went through the months. And y'all, this year has been so good. It's so easy to forget the good things, especially when the good things are the ordinary moments, the little magic. And I've started just taking pictures or taking little videos of the ordinary, normal things, because those really are what constitute life and make up life. And they're the things that often go missed and often go ignored. And frankly, when we look at the highlights of the year, we don't look back at those little moments. Yet those little moments were the very thing that brought us joy on that day. I really changed my thinking after my marriage ended. I really started thinking about every single day is so unique. We don't get this day again. And having that perspective has changed so much of how I think about the expenditure of my time. It's like every minute I give to someone else, it's it's costing me. And so is this thing worthy of my time? Is it worthy of the breath that's breathed into my lungs and how I choose to spend every day? And so really today spent planning 2026, it felt like such a good way to honor me and honor my life. And so for those of you who have not taken the time, I would really recommend putting it on the calendar. Just take a couple hours. Start by looking back at the pictures on your phone and just see how good 2025 has been. One of the questions my friend asked that I reflected on today is, when did I show up the best? What did my best self look like? How did it feel like? And I really would love to hear from you guys. What are some questions you've asked yourself as you're reflecting on 2025 as you head into 2026? Y'all, thank you so much for joining on YouTube. Leonardo, so happy to see you. Guys, I would love to hear. Feel free to put here in the chat just things that have been meaningful to you that you've asked yourself that have helped you reflect on the year past and also look ahead to the year to come. So as I look back, it's looking at pictures, remembering and reliving some of those moments that were really just so beautiful. And also, y'all, while I was doing that, it helped me recognize this is how and what it looked like for me to really be my best self and love other people well, perform well, do business well. Okay, so what's my definition of well in these different contexts and in these different circumstances, when did I feel really alive? What was life-giving to me? And I love that question of what's life-giving, because so much we actually, again, we were talking about kind of doling out our time. Time is money. But what is where I actually get some of that life force back? Where is I get a really good return on my investment for time? So if we start thinking of what is actually giving back to me for the time I'm paying, man, those are the moments that we want to spend and invest in. Those are the people we want to invest in. So it's like time for meaning in return. And so really looking at it through that lens was really helpful for me looking back on 2025. Another thing that I analyzed is what actually cost me more in terms of, okay, I spent time in this relationship and I actually walked away more depleted, more discouraged than I thought I would. And that was really important too, because time is precious, because we only have today, because we only have this one life that we know of. Let me really honor my time, identify where it's well spent, and then also where it feels maybe wasted or not honored. You know, y'all, there's people in our lives who spend time with us and don't honor us. And that's probably not a good place for us to spend our time. And there's a biblical text where it says, do not throw your pearls before swine, lest they trample on them. So really viewing ourselves and our time as something that's precious, man, that's a big question for us. Do we actually honor who we are to begin with? Do we honor our time? Do we honor who we are so that then we make a right choice? And William, I just saw you say a self promo allowed here. I love just having meaningful conversations. So if you've got something meaningful to offer, please feel free to share that. Y'all, so as we look back, asking those questions, but the way that the posture that we need to take is, do I actually have regard for the person that I am, the person that God made me to be? Do I have honor over myself and thus my time? And then I'm going to look at how I spend my time really differently. So that's part number one. Part number two is looking ahead. And what was really helpful, I'm just thinking back to the conversations I had with my sisters and also some of the questions I asked myself, you know, really identifying what are my personal goals, but then also what are some of my professional goals? You know, what are the things that I want to achieve with my business or on a work side of things, but then also the personal side. So one of the things that I saw, okay, I'm actually really healthy. I saw that one of those things is by way of spending time with people and community and friends and laughing. So I was like, okay, well, one of my personal goals then for 2026 is to intentionally create those times. And my sister even said she was looking at her entire calendar of 2026 and identifying when are their holidays, and she wants to do a trip during that time. So if we want to live intentionally, and we also identify, okay, these are the things that make me healthy, that are life-giving for me. This is where I get a really good return on my expenditure of time. Now let me craft that out and plan ahead so that I'm not living in reaction, living where it's, oh my gosh, next week is a holiday. Next week I have time off, or, oh, there's time that I know I'm going to be with family, but I'm not actually living with intention and planning proactively. So that's one of the things. What are your personal goals based on looking at 2025? What's healthy for you? And then what was life-giving to you? Go ahead and actually plan that out with intention. And, you know, some of the things that's really important for us as we look to the next year is, you know, are we communicating effectively with the people that we love, the areas in our life that we want to change? I was sitting in a room, a conference room one time, and some folks at the front were talking, and they were sharing about how, you know, we really actually need to communicate the change that we want to see in ourselves with other people. Otherwise, we're going to start changing and they're going to start wondering why, because in so many ways we train people how to treat us. So if all of a sudden we start changing and then we start expecting them to treat us differently, that's going to be confusing for them. We're going to start feeling hurt. We're going to feel like our boundaries are being crossed. But if we haven't effectively shared what those new boundaries are, man, that's just a recipe for disaster. So especially as we're heading into the Christmas holiday and we're identifying, you know, over the last year, these things I didn't like them. I didn't like how they engaged with me. Well, it's really important that as we identify what we didn't like, what was a poor expenditure of time, to effectively communicate and share, this is what I want to change, how I want to change it, and why I want to change it. That why is so incredibly important. I actually sat down with a couple of the different objectives and goals for next year and just really asked why. Why am I doing this in the first place? So for my business, I created, I just revisited or created my mission statement. I said how I was going to do it and why I was doing it. Because a lot of times the why is really missing. Hey Jeff, thanks for joining. I just saw you on YouTube. Thanks for joining, and Leonardo as well. Y'all, it's so important that when we're taking the time to chart out our life, that we understand why we're living it in the first place. Why are we wanting to live, make the change, expend the time? It's time is a change, exchange of money effectively. Why are we choosing that? There's this infamous quote that I just love. It's by Viktor Frankl. He was actually in Auschwitz in a German concentration camp, and he said, "In between stimulus and response is choice." And what that means is every time we're getting something that arouses us, that makes us upset, anything that stimulates us, that effectively, before we respond, we have a choice. And so our choice is ultimately like the greatest of all things. That's ours. Every single time we get a choice. And Viktor Frankl later in his book says, they can strip away every human freedom, but they cannot take the choice in how I respond. So really, we have so much choice. And so if we're not thinking with intention, how do I want to choose to live? How do I want to choose to respond? Then we're going to be operating on default and on autopilot, and we're actually not going to be the drivers of our lives. So I really want to just encourage you, as we're looking to 2026, where do I want to choose something different than how I lived in 2025? Because we have the power. For so many of us, we have the power to choose something different. But unless we actually take the time to plan out and chart a new course, we're going to be living on autopilot and going to just live on default. We have these old programs that we learned as children. It was either modeled for us by our parents. They showed us how to exist in relationships, or lack thereof. Maybe one of our parents left or passed away, or worse. So much was modeled to us, so much was given to us, and we inherited a lot. So instead of everything being inherited, someone said this the other day, instead of just inheriting everything, all of a sudden we get to install something new. We get to install a new program. We get to choose what is going to go in the place of what was the default that was given to us. But we have to choose it. We have to really take the time to effectively say, this is what I learned in the past. This is how it shows up in the present, and this is what I choose for the future. And so it does take time. Today I sat in my chair by the fire for a number of hours, and in some ways it takes some discipline to do that. But do it. It's so rewarding. I want to wrap up here just with a quick couple of updates around the Knowing Show. So one, I'm starting a series tomorrow about the habits of Christ. So since Christmas is on Thursday, 5 days from now, I'm doing 5 days leading up to Christmas around the habits of Christ. And how did Jesus, the embodiment of Christ, how did he live? What are the things that we need to learn from? Because at the end of the day, when we talk about choosing, man, do we have so much power if we are to effectively embody Christ within us. So how much more power could we actually tap into and activate if we were to have Christ active in us? So we're starting a series tomorrow. I'm so excited. We'll be going live. And then the other thing I wanted to say, in the new year, I am going to be going live every single day at the same time. Some of the lives will be live like this. Some of them will actually be pre-recorded, because going live at the same time every day for me has been very hard, especially if I want a guest. So my goal is consistency for 2026. That's, as I'm thinking about my theme for this year, it was predictability that leads to peace and partnerships and even positioning, knowing and allowing for it to really be something that people can understand, and that it really serves the mission. So those are that's my word for next year, is predictability. And I want to show up in a predictable way. Um, Y'all, thank you so much for joining me tonight. The series starts tomorrow, and I'll be going live. I actually am still working on what time we'll be going live. I might just choose tomorrow evening, and just go live over the next couple of nights. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me tonight on The Knowing Show, and I will see you tomorrow where we start our first conversation around the habits of Christ. And I think I'll be going live at 8 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. So